It was nearly midnight when the knock came. Ravi froze in place, his hand hovering above the half-cut guava on the counter. His tiny apartment was dark, except for the soft glow of a dying light bulb that barely lit the room. The quiet hum of the city, muffled by the rain, barely reached his ears. He hadn't been expecting anyone. No one came to visit him this late. No one ever did. The knife in his hand felt heavier than usual, almost as if it were tethered to his hesitation. He glanced at the small window, rain lashed against it, the drops pelting like angry fists. The silence in his room pressed against him, thick and suffocating. Another knock. Louder this time, echoing through the thin walls. Ravi's heart skipped a beat. He set the knife down on the counter, his fingers trembling slightly. It was a sound out of place, out of time. Who would knock on his door now? A stranger? No one ever came around here after hours. He lived on the fringes of the city, an old part of town where the streets were cracked and neglected, the lights flickering as though the city itself had forgotten it existed. His fruit cart, his only source of income, had been packed up hours ago, and he had closed his shop for the night. Still, the knock came again. Firmer this time, demanding. Ravi wiped his hands on his jeans and moved slowly to the door. His mind raced with questions, none of which made sense. He wasn't expecting anyone. His neighbors were either asleep or out of sight, and there was no reason for anyone to be out in this weather. He lived a simple life, one without much attention. People didn't care about fruit vendors who worked alone at night. The city had far bigger problems. Yet, someone stood on the other side of his door. The floorboards creaked under his feet as he approached the door, each step punctuating the stillness in his room. As his hand grasped the knob, his throat tightened. He was already dreading whatever would come next, though he couldn't understand why. He opened the door. And there, standing in the rain, was a woman. She was drenched, her long hair matted to her face, her clothes clinging to her like a second skin. She was shivering, though not from the cold, and her eyes locked onto his as if they had been searching for him for years. Ravi blinked, unable to move, as the figure before him stared with an intensity that felt both foreign and strangely familiar. She said nothing at first. Her lips parted, her chest rising and falling rapidly, but words failed her. Her face was pale, almost ghostly under the dim light, and her gaze was wild, desperate, searching for something Ravi couldn't place. A chill ran down his spine, but he couldn't bring himself to close the door. He was rooted in place, staring at her, trying to make sense of the surreal image she presented. "Do you remember me?" she asked, her voice weak but clear. Ravi felt his chest tighten as if the question itself had gripped him by the heart. He stared at her, feeling something shift inside him, something deep, long buried, trying to surface. The name, the memory, eluded him, but the feeling of recognition pressed against his consciousness like a long-forgotten echo. He took a hesitant step back, his mind racing. The words that followed almost slipped past his lips before he caught himself. "I'm sorry. I don't think I do." But the woman didn't flinch. Instead, she took a small, trembling step forward, her eyes pleading for something, an answer, an acknowledgement, anything. "I was lost," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. You gave me $10. I was alone. Scared. You were the only one who helped me." Ravi's stomach dropped. He felt lightheaded, as if the room had spun on its axis. The rain, the woman standing in front of him, her eyes locked on his, it was all spinning in a disorienting blur. His body felt heavy, weighed down by the surge of memories that rushed back in fragments. A little girl. Barefoot. Standing in front of his fruit cart, her tear-streaked face pleading for help. The desperation in her eyes had been impossible to ignore. She was lost, hungry, and afraid, much like many of the other children who wandered the streets at the time. But there was something different about her, something he couldn't place. She had seemed fragile. He remembered the decision he made in that moment. He had given her $10. Told her to find help. Told her to be brave, to get away from the streets before things got worse. But just as quickly as she had appeared, she had disappeared into the crowd, vanishing without a trace. Ravi never thought about her again. She was just another face in the sea of people, another fleeting moment in his life. Except now, 15 years later, she was standing in his doorway, a grown woman. She had found him. Ravi's breath caught in his throat. But, how did you? She cut him off, her eyes darkening. I've been looking for you for years. A shiver ran down his spine, and he glanced quickly around, almost as if the walls themselves were closing in on him. There was something else about her, something he couldn't put his finger on, something off. Her words, her presence, felt heavier than the rain. He was no longer sure if this was a reunion or a warning. You have no idea what you've started, she continued, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and urgency. What you did that day, it changed everything. Ravi's mind raced, but he couldn't form the words to respond. The flood of questions, the fear, the confusion, all left him speechless. She stared at him, waiting, as if she expected him to understand something he had long forgotten. He stepped back, gesturing for her to come inside. She didn't argue, stepping past him without another word. Her presence seemed to fill the room, an unsettling weight pressing against him. Who are you? Ravi asked again, his voice low and strained. What's going on? The woman, standing by the window now, gazed out at the storm. It's not what you think. You've been dragged into something far bigger than you realize. That $10. It was never about the money. Ravi stared at her, his heart racing. Then what was it about? Her eyes turned back to him, filled with something dark and unspoken. You'll find out soon enough. But first, you need to know the truth. You need to understand what's coming. Ravi swallowed hard, his hands trembling slightly. He could feel the weight of her words, each one heavier than the last. The air around them seemed thick, oppressive. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the soft hum of the city, as if it, too, were holding its breath. There was a knock on the door again, but this time, Ravi didn't move. The woman turned, her eyes flashing with something dangerous, something urgent. You don't know who's watching. And I'm not the only one who knows about you, Ravi. The words hung in the air like a warning, and as she spoke, Ravi felt a chill slide down his spine. Something was coming. Something he couldn't control. And whatever it was, it had found him. The knock echoed again, louder this time, as if something outside was pressing against the door, desperate to get in. Ravi stood frozen, watching the woman, his childhood memory, grown and changed, turn toward the door. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and urgency. The knock was not just a knock anymore. It felt like a warning. A countdown. Who's there? Ravi managed to croak, his voice almost lost in the thick air. His chest was tight, his breath shallow. She didn't answer him immediately. Instead, she moved quickly to the small window above the kitchen sink, peering out through the rain-streaked glass. Her hand gripped the curtain, pulling it back slightly to glance at the street below. Ravi followed her gaze, but all he could see was the blurry outline of the alley, lit dimly by the flickering streetlight at the corner. The storm had passed, but the air felt charged, heavy, like something was about to explode. Who's out there? Ravi asked again, his voice stronger this time, but the question felt hollow, as if he already knew the answer. She turned slowly, her eyes locking with his, her expression unreadable. You don't want to know. Ravi's mind was spinning. This was too much. A part of him wanted to shut the door, lock it, pretend like nothing was happening. But another part, the part that had made him give that little girl $10 all those years ago, knew deep down that he couldn't run from this. "You said I don't know who's watching," Ravi finally said, his voice trembling. "But what does that mean? Who's after me?" The woman took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing. She moved away from the window and stepped toward him, her pace deliberate, as though weighing every step before she took it. She reached out and gently placed a hand on his arm, a gesture that should have been comforting but felt anything but. "You think it's just about the money," she said quietly. "But it's not. Not even close." Ravi shook his head. "I don't understand. What's going on? What's happening here?" She took a step back and folded her arms, her eyes distant now, as if she were wrestling with something buried deep within her. Her voice lowered to a near whisper. "Do you remember anything else about that day? About me? About how I looked?" He blinked. "You were a little girl, lost, scared. I gave you money. You vanished before I could even ask your name." She nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes now, something almost mournful. "I was lost. But I wasn't the only one. You helped me, yes. But what you didn't know, is that you saved my life." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And that's where things started to go wrong." Ravi's heart pounded as he tried to process what she was saying. He had always assumed that his actions, helping a scared girl on the street, had been a small, insignificant moment. He never expected it to have any lasting impact. But the way she was speaking, it was clear that this wasn't just some random encounter. It was something much bigger. "I don't understand," he whispered, his mind reeling. She stared at him, her eyes dark with something deeper, something almost haunted. "You were never supposed to help me, Ravi. Not that day. And not after." She paused, swallowing hard, her lips trembling. "They were watching. They were always watching. And the moment you helped me, you became part of something much bigger than yourself." Ravi's stomach twisted. "Who? Who was watching?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she crossed the room and stood by the door, glancing out once more through the rain-speckled window. Ravi followed her, his eyes searching the street outside, though he saw nothing unusual. He was starting to feel like he was losing his grip on reality, like everything he knew was slipping away. "I don't have much time to explain," she said quietly, her voice a little shaky. "But I'll try to make it simple. The people who were after me, they were not who you think they are. They weren't just criminals. They weren't just ordinary bad people. They were part of something larger, something secret. A group that operates in the shadows. They call themselves the Collectors. And they were the ones who controlled everything. They controlled the streets, the businesses, the governments. They controlled the people who thought they were in charge. But they weren't interested in me. Not at first." Ravi's mind struggled to make sense of her words. "The Collectors? What do they want with you? And how do I fit into this?" She shook her head. "I didn't know who they were, not when I was a little girl. But they knew me. They knew I was special. And that's why they kept track of me. They watched me grow up. They knew I would come back to you eventually." Ravi took a step forward, a surge of anger mixing with his confusion. "What do you mean they knew you? And how do I fit into this? I don't understand." She turned back toward him, her face pale, her voice desperate. "It wasn't just me they were watching. It was you. You gave me the money, Ravi. You did something that no one else would do. That action, that simple act of kindness, was the key. And now, they know you're involved. They know you're part of the story." Ravi's blood ran cold. "I didn't do anything. I helped you. That's it. It was just a couple of bucks. Why does it matter?" She let out a bitter laugh, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You don't get it, do you? That $10 wasn't just money. It was a signal. A message. To them. Ravi felt a chill snake up his spine. To who? To who are you talking about? But before she could answer, the knock came again. This time, it wasn't just a knock. It was a pounding. A forceful, deliberate thud that rattled the doorframe. Ravi's heart raced. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. His mind screamed at him to do something, anything, but his legs wouldn't move. The woman turned to him, her expression panicked now. They're here. Who? Ravi breathed, his voice shaking. The collectors, she whispered urgently. And they won't stop until they get what they want. Before Ravi could react, there was another loud knock. And then, to his horror, he heard the unmistakable sound of the door handle turning. The woman rushed toward him, her voice frantic. Hide. Quickly. Without thinking, Ravi grabbed her arm and pulled her into the kitchen, the door handle rattling behind them. His mind was racing, trying to process the situation. Who were these people? Why were they after him? And why had she come back after all these years? The pounding on the door grew louder, more insistent. Ravi's eyes darted around the room, searching for any way to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The small apartment offered no safe place to hide. The woman looked at him, her face drawn with fear. They'll find us, Ravi. We need to leave. Now. But just as she spoke, the door splintered with a sharp crack. The door flew open, revealing a tall figure in the doorway. A man, dressed in dark clothes, his face shadowed by a hood. He didn't speak. He simply stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room with cold precision. Ravi's pulse thudded in his ears. Who the hell are you? The man didn't answer. Instead, he moved quickly, stepping into the room as if he already knew where to look. His gaze locked onto the woman, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, in a voice that was low and terrifyingly calm, he spoke. We've been looking for you. Ravi's pulse quickened as the man in the doorway stepped forward. His mind screamed for him to act, run, hide, do anything, but his body was frozen in place. The woman beside him was visibly shaking, her body tense, as though preparing for something far worse than this stranger's intrusion. The man, tall and imposing, didn't say another word. He simply looked at the woman with cold, unfeeling eyes, his face partially obscured by the hood he wore. The darkness in his gaze seemed to pierce through the thin veneer of their reality, as if he saw not just the room, but everything beneath it. Ravi's throat was tight, the air in the room suffocating. It felt as though the walls were closing in on him. Who are you? Ravi demanded, his voice shaking but desperate. What do you want with her? What do you want with me? The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at Ravi, his gaze flat, disinterested. As though he was far too familiar with this scenario to be bothered with an explanation. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, sleek device, a tablet, or some sort of touchscreen device, and with a few quick gestures, he flicked it on. Ravi's eyes followed the device in confusion. The man stared at the screen for a moment, before his attention shifted back to the woman, now backed against the kitchen counter, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She was terrified, and Ravi felt an irrational urge to protect her, even though he barely knew her. I know what you did, the man said, his voice low, but the threat clear. You can't hide from this forever. The collectors always get what they want. Ravi took a hesitant step forward. You're with them, aren't you? The collectors? He glanced at the woman. Is that why you're here? Why you came to find me? She opened her mouth to speak, but the man cut her off. She was never supposed to be a part of this. She made a choice that she didn't fully understand. And now she's dragged you into it. Congratulations, Ravi. His words dripped with contempt. You've just become a part of something much larger than you ever wanted to be. The woman's eyes flickered toward Ravi, full of regret and a silent apology. She had brought him into this. She had dragged him into a world of secrets and shadows, a world he had no understanding of. And yet, here they were. There was no turning back. What is this? Who are the collectors? Ravi asked, his voice rising, a mixture of anger and fear. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins now, as though he was standing on the edge of a cliff, and everything below was darkness. The man didn't respond immediately. He only studied Ravi for a moment, sizing him up. The collectors are more than just a group. They are an organization, a hidden power, and they have been pulling the strings for centuries. Governments, corporations, even entire societies have fallen under their influence. But they don't just control. They collect. People. Secrets. Artifacts. Anything that holds value. Ravi's mind struggled to grasp the enormity of what the man was saying. What do they want with me? Why did they want her back then? Why now? What did I have to do with all of this? The man's lips twitched, almost as though he were amused by Ravi's naivety. You think you had nothing to do with it? You think your actions were random? You're wrong, Ravi. Your life, and hers. He glanced at the woman, who was still clutching herself, eyes downcast. They've always been intertwined. The collectors knew exactly what they were doing when they let you help her. They knew you were a part of something bigger than both of you. Ravi's heart sank. I didn't know what I was doing. I just gave her money. I didn't know who she was, what she needed. I just thought. I thought I was helping a kid. The man's eyes darkened, and he took a step closer to Ravi, his voice cold and unyielding. The collectors don't leave things to chance. They always know what people are capable of. And when you gave her that $10, you unknowingly gave her a key that could unlock something dangerous. Ravi's confusion was palpable. A key? What do you mean, a key? What was so special about that day, about that $10? The woman suddenly spoke, her voice hoarse and strained. It wasn't just money. It was a test. Ravi's head snapped toward her. A test? What do you mean? What kind of test? The woman closed her eyes, as though summoning the courage to speak. The collectors, they have a network. A network of people who are part of their operation. They have agents, informants, and operatives everywhere. The $10, it was a signal. A way for them to track people. To see who would help, who would care enough to get involved. Ravi felt a wave of nausea rise in his stomach. And I passed the test, didn't I? She nodded, her eyes filled with guilt. Yes. You did. And that's why they've been watching you. Why they've been waiting for this moment. But why me? I'm just a fruit vendor. I don't even make much money. I don't know anything about the world they're in. I just... You're more important than you think, the man interrupted, his voice cutting through Ravi's words. And it's time you realized that. Ravi's mind whirled with this new information. He had always thought his life was simple. He had always thought his actions, helping a lost girl, giving her money, were just acts of kindness. But now, it seemed like every step, every choice he had made had been leading to this moment. He turned back to the woman. Why didn't you tell me all this earlier? Why didn't you warn me? She looked up at him, her eyes clouded with regret. I couldn't. I didn't remember until recently. I didn't even know who I was, not really. I've been trying to figure this all out for years. And when I found you again, when I remembered, I knew I had to come back. I thought I could help, but now. She swallowed hard, her voice faltering. Now I've put you in danger. And I'm so sorry. Ravi's anger began to simmer. Danger? What kind of danger are we talking about here? What do they want with me? With you? The man in the doorway finally spoke again, his voice low and dangerous. What the collectors want isn't something you can understand yet. But they'll make sure you understand soon enough. You have something they need. And they'll do whatever it takes to get it. Ravi took a step back, the weight of the man's words crashing down on him. What do they need? What could they possibly want from me? The man's lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't a smile of amusement, it was one of cold, calculating certainty. You'll find out soon enough. Before Ravi could respond, there was a sudden crash from outside the apartment. The sound of shuffling feet. The sound of someone, or something, moving swiftly and silently in the hallway. Ravi's heart skipped a beat. His eyes snapped toward the door. The man in the doorway seemed unfazed, but the woman beside Ravi tensed, her eyes wide with fear. They found us, she whispered. It's over. Ravi's mind raced. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to stop what was happening. His whole life had been turned upside down in the span of a few hours, and now it seemed like there was no way out. The man in the doorway gave him one last look before turning his attention to the woman. It's time. You're coming with me. The woman's expression shifted, something hard and resolute flickered in her eyes. No, she said firmly, her voice rising. I'm not going anywhere with you. Not without him. The man's smile faded. You have no choice. Ravi's heart pounded. His mind screamed for him to run, but his legs refused to move. All he could do was watch as the two figures before him prepared to do whatever it was that had brought them to this point. And in that moment, Ravi knew one thing for sure, his life was never going to be the same again. Ravi's heart raced in his chest, his mind spinning in 1,000 different directions. The woman standing beside him, the girl he had helped all those years ago, was now the center of a mystery far darker than he had ever imagined. And he, unwillingly, had become a part of it. As the man in the doorway's expression turned colder, the air in the room grew heavy with the threat of impending danger. The woman, once so fragile and vulnerable, now stood before him with an intensity that almost made Ravi wonder if he had ever truly known her. No, I'm not going with you, she repeated firmly, her voice sharp, though her hands trembled slightly. The man in the doorway gave her a look that sent chills down Ravi's spine. You don't have a choice. You know this. You can't outrun this. The woman's eyes never left the man. I'll never go back to them. Never. Not after what they did to me. The man paused, then stepped into the apartment, moving with the smooth, calculated precision of someone who had done this before. The way he moved suggested a lifetime of training, of dealing with people like her, people who tried to escape. Escaping isn't an option, he said softly, almost pityingly. You know that better than anyone. Ravi watched the exchange, his mind reeling. What did the man mean? What had the collectors done to her? Why was she so terrified of them? And why had she returned to him after all these years? The woman took a step back, her eyes wide with panic. I don't want to go back there. You don't understand what they did to me. Ravi took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He couldn't just stand there. This was his life on the line now too. He had to do something. Stop, he shouted, surprising himself with the force of his voice. Tell me what's going on. What did they do to you? What do they want from us? The man didn't flinch, his eyes never leaving the woman. But the woman, her eyes darted to Ravi for the briefest of moments, a flicker of vulnerability crossing her face. They turned me into one of them, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't have a choice. I thought I could escape, but I was wrong. You don't know what they're capable of. What they do to people who try to leave. Ravi's mind was spinning. He could feel the pieces starting to fall into place, but he couldn't yet see the full picture. The way the woman had spoken about the collectors, about what they had done to her, it was as though she had been through something unthinkable. And yet, there she was, standing in front of him, not the scared little girl he had once helped, but a woman caught in the web of a dangerous, shadowy organization. "What do you mean, turn you into one of them?" Ravi asked, his voice trembling as the weight of her words sank in. The woman closed her eyes, as if trying to shut out the memories, trying to block out the pain. But it was clear she couldn't. "I wasn't just a runaway child," she said, her voice strained, but her tone finally steady. "They found me when I was just a little girl. They put me through things. Tests. Trials. They conditioned me. And eventually, they marked me. They gave me an identity, a new name. I became part of their network." Ravi stepped closer, his heart aching for her. He had always wondered what had happened to her after that day, but never in his wildest dreams had he imagined this. "What kind of tests? What do you mean by conditioned?" Ravi asked, trying to piece together the nightmare she had lived through. The woman's face hardened, the vulnerability fading as she spoke. "The collectors are ruthless. They have their hands in everything. They control governments, they own businesses. But that's not what makes them dangerous. What makes them dangerous is their ability to break people. They take what's good in you, your humanity, and they twist it into something else. Something they can use. And when you're in the system long enough, you become just like them." Ravi's stomach turned. The thought of the little girl he had once helped being put through such horrors made his blood run cold. "And then, when I was old enough, they sent me out into the world, under a new identity," she continued, her voice almost detached, as though the words had lost their meaning after all this time. "I was supposed to be an agent, an asset. They controlled everything about my life. I was no longer myself." Ravi swallowed, the reality of the situation sinking in like a weight in his chest. "So, you're telling me they brainwashed you? They made you into a tool for them?" She nodded, her eyes distant. "Exactly. They didn't just take my freedom. They took my identity. Everything I was, everything I could have been, they turned it into something they could use. And when I tried to leave, when I tried to run, they found me. They always find you." The man in the doorway stepped forward again, his cold eyes never leaving her. "You've been running for years. But it's time to come home. You can't hide forever." "Not again," she said firmly, stepping away from him. "I'll die before I go back to them." The man didn't seem moved by her words. He simply raised an eyebrow. "You'll die either way. The collectors don't tolerate defiance. Not for long." Ravi's thoughts raced. There had to be something he could do, some way out of this mess. The woman, he needed to protect her, to help her, just like he had years ago. But now, it wasn't just a matter of giving her a few dollars and sending her on her way. He was tangled in this, and he didn't know how to get out. "Why me?" Ravi asked suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. "Why did they come for me? Why did they let me help you back then? What did I do to get involved in this?" The man's lips curled into a tight smile. "You were part of their plan all along, Ravi. You didn't know it, but you were a pawn in their game. You're just like her, a piece of the puzzle. And now, you've become important. Whether you like it or not, you're in this now." Ravi felt a cold sweat break out on his skin. He had no idea what the man meant, but the fear in his voice made it clear, this wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. He was in too deep now. There was no going back. The woman looked at him, her face full of a mixture of regret and apology. "Ravi, I'm so sorry. I didn't want this. I never wanted this for you. Ravi shook his head, still trying to comprehend what was happening. None of this is your fault. You were a kid. You didn't have a choice. She smiled faintly, but the sadness in her eyes was undeniable. No one ever has a choice with the collectors. The man in the doorway shifted, his posture indicating that the conversation was over. This is your last chance, he said, his voice low. Come with me quietly, and we'll make it easy. Resist, and I'll have to drag you back. And you don't want to see what happens when they drag you back. The woman stepped forward, her body trembling with the force of her defiance. I won't go with you. I'll never go back to them. Ravi looked at her, his heart heavy with fear and confusion. What could he do? How could he protect her from this nightmare that was closing in on them? Then, as if fate had decided to give him one last shot, Ravi remembered something, the small piece of hope he had been holding on to ever since the knock on the door. The moment when everything changed. He glanced toward the back door. The storm had passed. The alleyway was quiet, but it could still be their escape. A way out. Without thinking, he grabbed the woman's arm and yanked her toward the back door. Come on, he shouted. We're getting out of here. Now. For a brief moment, the man in the doorway didn't move. But then, just as Ravi thought they might escape, the man's voice stopped them in their tracks. You won't get far, he warned, his voice as cold as ice. The collectors never let anyone go. But Ravi wasn't listening. He pushed open the back door, the cold night air hitting them like a slap in the face. This was their chance, and they couldn't waste it. With one last look at the man in the doorway, Ravi grabbed the woman's hand and ran. Ravi's breath came in ragged gasps as he dragged the woman through the alleyway, the cold night air biting at their skin. Every step seemed to echo in the darkness, as if they were being pursued, hunted, their every move watched. The sound of footsteps behind them, distant but growing closer, spurred them forward. Keep moving. Ravi hissed, glancing over his shoulder. The dim light from the street lamps flickered, casting long shadows across the alley, but there was no sign of the man who had come to collect her, yet. The woman stumbled slightly, her breathing labored, but she didn't resist. She had no time to stop and think, no time to question the decision she had just made. They had to keep running. You're sure you can get us out of here? Ravi asked, looking at her through the gloom. She nodded, her face tight with fear, but there was something else in her eyes, determination, a fierce resolve that had not been there moments ago. I know a place. It's safe, for now. Ravi nodded, trusting her as best he could in this madness. He didn't understand everything that was happening, but he knew that she was the only person who could help him make sense of it all. She was the only person who could get them out of this nightmare. They moved quickly, weaving through the labyrinth of narrow alleys and backstreets, their footsteps muffled by the dampness of the night. Every corner felt like another potential trap, every shadow could conceal an enemy. Ravi could feel his heart thudding in his chest, a constant reminder that they were on the edge of something much bigger than they had ever imagined. The woman glanced at him, her eyes shadowed with worry. We can't keep running forever, she said, her voice quiet but urgent. They'll find us. They always do. I know, Ravi replied. But for now, we have to keep moving. We can't let them catch us, not yet. They reached a dead-end alley, the brick walls rising on either side of them like silent sentinels. The woman hesitated for a moment before walking up to a rusted metal door hidden in the shadow of a building. She knocked twice, and then paused. Ravi's eyes scanned the alley. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps now, and it wasn't just one set. It was more, closer, like they were closing in. His breath quickened, his instincts screaming that they didn't have much time. The woman knocked again, 3 times this time, and then the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit interior. Quick, in here, she urged, her voice frantic. Ravi didn't hesitate. He grabbed her arm and pulled her inside, just as the sounds of footsteps grew louder. They were close. Too close. The door slammed shut behind them, and for a brief moment, there was silence. Inside, the room was cold, the air stale and heavy with the scent of dust and something else, something metallic, like iron. The walls were lined with shelves filled with old crates and boxes. A few dim light bulbs hung from the ceiling, casting the room in an eerie glow. The woman moved quickly, her eyes darting around the room. She hurried toward a corner where a small desk sat, papers strewn across it, and a laptop plugged into a wall socket. She opened the laptop and began typing furiously, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Ravi took a few steps away from the desk, his heart still racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It was like the walls themselves were closing in, the sense of danger suffocating. "Who else is here?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes scanning the room. "Is there anyone else?" She didn't look up from the screen, her focus fixed on whatever she was typing. "This place is off the grid," she said tersely. "No one else will find us here. For now, we're safe." Ravi nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure. He wasn't used to this kind of life. The constant fear, the feeling that danger was lurking around every corner. But he couldn't back down now. Not after everything he had learned. He had to protect her. He had to see this through. Are you going to tell me everything now?" Ravi asked, his voice shaking slightly. "What is this? What's going on? Who are the collectors? And why did they want me involved?" The woman paused, her fingers hovering above the keyboard. She took a deep breath before turning to face him. Her eyes were wide, her expression filled with a mixture of regret and resolve. "I'll tell you everything," she said quietly. "But you need to understand that this isn't something we can just walk away from. Once you're in the collector's sights, there's no going back. No matter what I tell you, no matter what we do, they'll never stop looking for us." Ravi swallowed hard. "I understand. But you have to tell me. I need to know." The woman nodded and began pacing, her thoughts clearly elsewhere as she gathered the words. "The collectors are an organization that's been around for centuries. But they aren't just after wealth or power like other criminal organizations. They collect people, artifacts, secrets, anything of value. They work in the shadows, controlling events, manipulating governments, corporations, everything. You wouldn't believe the things they've done over the years. They don't care about anyone's life, only about their agenda." Ravi's mind struggled to comprehend everything she was saying. But why me? Why did they care about me? Her eyes flickered to him, her gaze filled with something, guilt, perhaps, or sorrow. "You were part of the plan. You were never meant to just be an innocent bystander. The collectors knew who you were the moment you helped me all those years ago. They set it all up. You were always supposed to get involved." Ravi's chest tightened. "What do you mean, set it all up? I didn't know what was going on back then. I just thought I was helping someone in need." She nodded slowly. "That's what they do. They manipulate people, use them without them even realizing it. You thought you were just helping a lost girl. But they were watching. They were always watching." Ravi's heart pounded. But why? What was so important about that $10? Why didn't they just come for me right away? The woman's expression darkened. That $10 wasn't just money. It was a signal. A test. They wanted to see if you were someone they could use, someone who could be manipulated into their world. They saw your kindness, your willingness to help, and they decided that you were a perfect candidate. Ravi shook his head. No. No, that's insane. How could I have been part of all this without knowing? The woman's eyes were filled with an emotion Ravi couldn't quite place. You were always part of it, Ravi. They never give people a choice. Not really. They know how to pull strings, how to make things happen without anyone even realizing it. You were marked that day. And once they knew you were involved, they would stop at nothing to make sure you stayed involved. Ravi stepped back, trying to process everything she had just said. It felt like his whole world was crashing down around him. The simple life he had known, the easy days of running his fruit stand, those days were gone. Now, he was caught in the middle of a conspiracy that stretched across the globe, an organization that could make or break anyone without a second thought. He took a deep breath. So, what now? What do we do? The woman hesitated. Now, we fight back. Ravi blinked, unsure of what she meant. Fight back? How do we fight back against something like this? She looked at him, her eyes hardening. We expose them. We bring them into the light. The collectors are too powerful to be ignored, but they're also too arrogant to think anyone can challenge them. That's their mistake. Ravi could hardly believe the words that were coming out of her mouth. You're asking me to take down an entire global organization? To expose them? How are we supposed to do that? The woman walked over to the desk and pulled out a small device, pressing a few buttons. On the screen, a map appeared, a map of locations across the globe. She pointed at the screen, her finger tracing one of the marked locations. They have a facility here. One of their primary operations, she said. If we can get inside, we can find the evidence we need to expose them. We can bring everything they've done to light. Ravi's eyes widened. And you think we can just walk in there and take it? She smiled, a grim, determined smile. We don't walk in. We make them think we're one of them. We get inside, gather the information, and then we expose them to the world. It's risky, but it's our only shot. Ravi looked at her, trying to make sense of what she was saying. But in that moment, something deep inside him clicked. There was no going back now. This was bigger than him, bigger than anything he had ever imagined. All right, Ravi said, his voice steady now. Let's do it. Ravi stood at the edge of the darkness, staring at the facility ahead. The cold air bit at his skin, but the chill he felt wasn't from the weather. It was the gnawing uncertainty of what was to come. The woman, now revealed to him as Maya, had been right. This was their last chance, the only opportunity they would ever have to take down the collectors. They had to expose them. They had to end this nightmare. But the fear gnawing at his insides, the weight of the decision, was something he couldn't shake. They were on the precipice of something monumental. If they failed, they wouldn't just lose their lives, they would lose everything. This was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a fight for their very souls. We're almost there, Maya whispered, her voice tight with tension as she stood beside him. Ravi nodded, though his mind was swirling. They had come so far. They had outsmarted the collectors' men, slipped through their fingers more times than they could count. But this was different. This was the heart of the collectors' operations. The fortress. You ready? Maya asked, her voice quiet but steady. It was the first time she had spoken with such calm since they had first met. Ravi took a deep breath. The wind howled, carrying with it the sounds of the distant city, life going on, oblivious to the danger they were about to face. He turned to Maya, his eyes meeting hers. In that brief moment, he realized how much they had both changed over the past few weeks. She was no longer the frightened girl from years ago, and he was no longer the fruit vendor who lived a simple life. They had been pulled into something far bigger than themselves. Let's do this, he said, the words feeling heavy but necessary. There was no turning back now. Maya didn't speak. She only nodded and moved forward, leading the way toward the darkened entrance of the facility. The building before them was a high-tech, fortified structure with few windows and an eerie silence that hung in the air. The night cloaked them, but Ravi knew that once they crossed the threshold, they would be in full view of the collectors. No more shadows, no more running. They would either succeed or they wouldn't. The security around the place was tight. Ravi had been briefed by Maya on the layouts, the guards, the security systems. They had a plan, and they had to follow it down to the smallest detail. The woman had been prepared for this moment long before he even knew what was happening. They made their way around the back of the facility, staying low and avoiding the security cameras. Maya had worked with an underground hacker group in the past, and they had managed to plant a virus in the facility's system, giving them a brief window of time where they could slip in undetected. It was their only chance. When they reached the service door, Maya pulled out a small device and slid it into the lock. The mechanism clicked, and the door creaked open. "Stay close," Maya whispered, her voice urgent. "Once we're in, there's no turning back." Ravi nodded and followed her inside. The air was sterile, cold, unnaturally so. The hallway was dimly lit, and the hum of machinery filled the space, making everything feel even more impersonal, like they were intruding in a place that had long since lost its humanity. The walls seemed to close in around them, each step echoing in the emptiness. They moved quickly, as quietly as they could. Every door they passed was sealed with high-tech locks, and the rooms behind them were shrouded in mystery. Ravi knew what they had to find: the central data room, where all of the collector's most valuable information was stored. It was the key to exposing them, to taking down their entire operation. As they turned a corner, Maya froze, her body going rigid. Ravi stopped beside her, his heart pounding as he looked around. The hallway stretched out before them, eerily silent. Maya's hand went to her ear, and she tapped the small device embedded in her earpiece. She frowned, listening intently. "What's wrong?" Ravi whispered. "It's them," Maya said, her voice tight. "They know we're here." Before Ravi could react, the faint sound of footsteps reached his ears. Heavy boots. More than one set. They were coming toward them. Maya cursed under her breath. "We don't have time," she said. "We need to move now." Without a word, they broke into a run, turning corners, dodging security checkpoints, and weaving through the maze of sterile hallways. But the sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. They were closing in on them, and the pounding in Ravi's chest felt like a drumbeat of impending doom. They reached a set of double doors, and Maya slammed her hand against the access panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss. They rushed inside. The room was vast, more than Ravi had imagined. It was filled with rows upon rows of high-tech equipment, servers, and monitors, all connected to a vast network that spanned the globe. This was the heart of the collector's operations. The nerve center. Maya immediately went to a console, her fingers moving expertly across the keys as she bypassed security protocols. Ravi stood guard, his eyes darting to the door as the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder. "They're coming," he warned. "Hurry." "I'm almost there," Maya said, her voice calm but strained. She was focused, her eyes flicking across the screen as lines of code appeared and disappeared. "I need access to their main server." Just a few more seconds. Ravi's stomach twisted as he heard the doors at the far end of the room hiss open. Shadows appeared, moving swiftly, with the unmistakable sound of boots on the cold floor. "Get down!" Maya hissed, yanking him toward the floor behind one of the workstations. They crouched in the darkness, holding their breath, listening as the footsteps drew nearer. Ravi's heart was in his throat, the world narrowing to the sound of his pulse. The doors at the other end of the room opened, and two men entered, armed and focused, their eyes scanning the area. Ravi's hand instinctively reached for the small knife he had been carrying, but Maya stopped him with a firm grip on his wrist. "Not yet," she whispered. The men moved closer, oblivious to their presence, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Maya glanced at the screen, her fingers flying over the keys, and then, finally, the soft click of success. She leaned back, her eyes flashing. "I've got it," she said softly. "We have everything we need." Ravi's heart skipped a beat. "Are you sure?" Maya didn't answer. Instead, she moved toward the console, accessing the files with a sense of urgency. As she extracted the data, the men turned, walking toward the opposite side of the room. But before they could get any closer, Maya hit another key, and a series of loud alarms blared through the facility. "Time's up," she said with a cold smile. The men turned in surprise, but it was too late. Maya was already at the door, pulling Ravi with her. "Move," she shouted. They dashed out of the room, the alarms ringing in their ears, the sound of boots following closely behind. It was a race against time now, and they had no choice but to make it out alive. They ran, their footsteps pounding in unison, the distant sound of the collector's men getting louder. They could see the exit ahead, but they weren't safe yet. Not by a long shot. "Almost there," Maya shouted, her voice filled with determination. Just as they reached the exit, a figure appeared in their path, blocking the door. The man from before. The one who had been chasing them from the beginning. He smiled, a slow, almost mocking smile, as if he knew that this was the end of the line. "You really thought you could escape, didn't you?" he said, his voice calm and collected. Ravi's blood ran cold. But Maya, to his surprise, stood tall, unshaken. "We already have what we came for," she said, her voice steely. The man's smile faltered for a moment, and in that brief second, Maya grabbed Ravi's hand and yanked him forward, charging at the door. The man didn't react fast enough. With one final shove, they broke through the door, running out into the night. And for the first time in a long time, Ravi allowed himself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had done it. Maybe they had just taken down the collectors.